Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Hey Balla, I have a question. We're on number 6. I know it's slow going, but I'm lazy, so you guys don't get any content. Yeah, we got some great questions today. One on reviewing your VODs, which is gonna be really fun. We have a bunch of stuff on game plan, and we had a ton of submissions again. So I really appreciate everybody submitting questions and all that. You guys are amazing. If I'm not reading your questions, I'm sorry. There's a lot of them, and I can only do 5 an episode. I'm trying to keep track of really good ones, and if I didn't do an episode when you already submitted, or if I do an episode and you already submitted and I don't look at it, it still could come up in the future. So keep an eye out. Keep an eye out. Besides that, yeah, I think we're good. And if you guys are liking this content, make sure you like and subscribe on the video. I said at the beginning because they're long as hell. I'm sorry for that, but I don't put many ads, so I don't get much money. I'm just kidding. All right, let's get into it.
Hey Balla, I'm a decent player, I would say. I placed from top 200 in the last 4 solo cash cups and top 300 in the last 3 of FNCS. But I would like to know where my next step is, or how do I proceed to get to the next level. I'm practicing my mechanics every day and I'm trying to review my own VODs a lot, but I feel like I'm lacking experience on how to review my VODs. So we could get some tips and pointers on how to actually review your own gameplay and how to improve those things I'm lacking. For example, I find myself struggling with this W key meta. My late games are really fine, and that's where I get most of my points. But every time I review my own VODs, I always realize that I don't push enough people early or mid game and don't get enough points because lack of kills. I think this is because when I'm in shambles, I don't want to fight because I figure I'm going to lose the fight. But when I have too good loot, I feel like I don't want to fight either because I don't want to risk not playing late game with the good loot. So my question is, how do I successfully review my own VODs and improve the things I'm doing wrong?
All right, cool. Thank you for the submission, D26. Appreciate that. I wasn't really sure with the last part of that, but basically I think this question boils down to how do I successfully review my VODs and find things to improve on, I think. So that's what I'm going to answer. So what I basically boiled it down to here is I'm a decent player, but I would like to figure out what my next step of improvement is. And he doesn't have experience reviewing his own plays. How do I review my VODs? So instead of trying to tackle specifically the stuff that D26 said in his question about late game and finding kills and stuff like that, let's just talk about how you review your VODs, how you're supposed to do VOD review and what it's useful for and all that sort of stuff. So let me just go over what I do, what I've done for years and how I improved and got at a high level in competitive Fortnite. So I have 2 different styles basically of VOD reviewing myself. One is when it's important games, when it's matches, when it's FCS, when it really matters, when you're trying to play the best possible that you can, right? So these are the very, very important games. I review every single one of them from start to finish. And I literally try to take notes on every little important detail that me or my teammates mess up. Okay, so this is missed builds, bad rotations, inefficient farming, bad early game splits, or taking a bad fight decision making, or actually the fight mechanics being bad, being a bad support player, for example, not shooting when I could have from down below because I couldn't do anything else, right? Like inefficient use of your time. So those are some of the things to take notes on, but the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So take notes on every little bad mistake that you find or every little thing that you do good. If you do something well and you want to make sure that you do it again, write it down too. Write it down. If it's you or your teammates, write it down. The list goes on. There could be a million different things that you can write down. But I also, and I think this is the more useful thing, is I ask questions about the game, about how it played out, right? I try to figure out things and well, the questions are meant to be open-ended, right? Maybe I would ask, is there a way to play this early game fight better? Is there a way to, rotate out of Pleasant Park better, right? Is there a timing that we should hit? These random questions that occur, you have them all the time. Just write them down, especially when you're watching your VODs. Write them down and try to come up with a solution for them. If they're apparent right away, right off the bat, when you say oh, is there a better time to rotate? Is there an optimal time window to rotate? And you look at the replay or you look at the VOD and half the time you're getting fought when you rotate, then yeah, there's probably an optimal time. It's either earlier or after. Let's try those. So apparent solutions, I write those down directly to my questions, but it's okay to have open-ended, right? Because later on, right after you reviewed it, when you have this question in your mind, you're going to be able to look and watch when you're watching pros or when you're watching yourself later on, and you realize an answer to the question. There you go, right? So write down some open-ended questions about the games just that occur to you, right? That could make you end up having a better play, right? Then obviously also to all the mistakes that you made earlier, all the ones that I listed out, you should definitely try to come up with solutions for those, right? So let's say you take an inefficient farming path, or your teammate takes an inefficient farming path, right? So you write down, Bumpa rotated to doghouse instead of rotating to blacktops. And that caused us both to be at blacktops at the same time, right? That's something you write down, and then the solution is Bumpa rotate to doghouse. You go through doghouse instead, right? Now we're not both at the same spot. Those are really easy solutions. Write down the error and then write down the solution, and then you'll be able to present that later to your teammate. So on that note, yes, review them with your teammate. Take all those notes that you took on every single game and those important ones, and just send them to your teammates and be like, hey, look at that note, look at that note. Like give them some focal points. You don't want to inundate them with information that's useless to them, where like half the notes are about yourself and then like 3 of them are about your teammates, right? But yeah, share that with your entire team. With a trio too, what's interesting is that you might be directing feedback at one person, but the other person too, who might not have really anything important in that feedback, still can add his 2 cents. You can be like, well, no, actually, I don't like that solution because then when I'm doing this, I'm looting this, that causes an issue for me. Now there's an efficiency with my own path. So what I would suggest actually is this, okay? So that's awesome. I love trios for that. I love squads for that. I love having a lot more people on the team for that. And then also something I just wrote in my notes here is that if it's not obvious what you're talking about, make sure you timestamp it so they can go look for themselves. I've had that be pretty useful in the past. But yeah, that's just finding the notes. That's just finding the improvements. That's just finding the errors, right? That's not really doing anything useful. That's just spotting stuff, and that's not useful at all. I've talked about it many, many times before, but if you do spot something, if you find a new technique, if you find an error in your play, you have to try it out. You have to. So once you review your notes, figure out the important things that you want to try and go try them, whether it's in creative, whether it's in playground, whether it's in a pub. If you can easily recreate a situation, a loop path, for example, is super easy to recreate. A rotation, super easy to recreate in an Atlanta scrim. Right? It doesn't even have to be your team. It could be a pug. You can pick some people up and just try it in an Atlanta scrim. Just try it once, see how it is. And maybe you'll already start to spot some of the inefficiencies in your solution, which might be, so bad that you don't want to go with that solution, or it's something overcomable, but at least you'll have a head start, and you'll realize, and it'll start to be muscle memory, right? It'll start to be rote. You don't have to spend all that time building it up in your important matches, right? I think that's very important. You have to try it. If it's easy to recreate it as soon as possible. Then I go to sleep. And this is an important part. I've read my notes. I've reviewed them. I've tried a few things in terms of solutions. Then I go to sleep. Sleep on it. When I wake up and I start my next practice session after work or after school or whatever, when I start my next practice session, I go back and look at those notes again, right? You give it a whole day. You might not have been thinking about every single little detail, but make sure you reread them at least twice. Once directly after you've taken them all, and then once sometime in the next day. Please, 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 please do that. So valuable. That next day, looking at those notes again is one of the most important things that people miss out on. And they miss so much of what they just did in their VOD review because they don't look at their notes again. I would even recommend looking at every single note from the past week each time you do VOD review, right? Just look at all the notes for the past week. That's probably a little bit overkill, but it's also very easy to do, right? It only takes a couple seconds to look over your notes. So yeah, those are the important games, but Then I also have a style of VOD viewing myself where it's like, oh, I'm just grinding arena games or I'm just grinding Atlanta scrims or something like that. And I've talked about this in the past on some of the viewer VOD reviews where it's just find the most important thing in the arena game, find the most important mistake, whether you won or lost, and just find a solution to that and go to the next game. It literally takes 5 minutes. It's literally the time it takes to queue for the next custom or the next arena game. It's 5 minutes. Just watch it back, scrub through it, find the point that you died and attribute a mistake, attribute a reason to it and come up with a solution and try to recreate that in the next game. You might not have the opportunity, but at least you've written it down. At least you've had a solution that you can try again later on. So just every single game that you're grinding, take the 2 minutes it takes to go watch the death back and ascribe a reason to it. Oh, I didn't right hand peek. I left hand peeked. Boom. How do I do that? Okay, I'm not going to make this edit anymore. I'm going to try that. Right? You're not going to have the opportunity to try it like in the in-depth VOD review where you're looking at every single tournament game, but at least you're still ascribing errors and you'll start to see a pattern, right? One of the biggest points of this question was how important or you're lacking experience to find the biggest errors in your ways, right? Your play style and stuff like that. So I think that's important is finding all these little mistakes, all these little things, maybe big things too, and that will lead to the biggest thing that you need to work on. You'll start to actually realize, hey, my biggest weakness right now is this. My biggest weakness right now is actually my tunneling in endgame. I make so many mistakes in my tunneling in endgame, and that wastes a lot of mats. So that's what I'm gonna work on. Okay. Cool.
Hey Balla, so my question is about my trio and our roles that we play. So our trio is made up of me, my duo partner, and another guy. So me and my duo partner, when we used to play, I would always be the IGL pretty much. And now in our trio, me and the other guy are sort of both IGLs and both sort of play the IGL role. And sometimes it can get kind of confusing when we're trying to listen to like both people calling plays and like who we should listen to and stuff like that. So I just wanted to know if you had any sort of advice. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you for the question, Duncan. Pretty simple question, actually. Basically, our trio has 2 IGLs, and how do we stop it from getting confusing and misleading and oftentimes frustrating? So I don't know. I think a lot of people probably have this issue because a lot of people want to be IGLs. They do. They want to be IGLs, or it's 3 people, so it's not really easy to directly pick an IGL because it's only 3 people, right? So it was the same thing in duos, right? Where there doesn't necessarily need to be an IGL, but everybody wants to make calls. Everybody wants to make decisions. Everybody thinks they have the right play. So, yeah. So somebody in chat asked, what's an IGL? IGL is an in-game leader. Before we dive deep in that question, thank you for asking that in chat. For people who don't know what an IGL is, an in-game leader is the person who leads the team, the person who makes decisions, the person who tries to lead and guide the team to the appropriate place, right? Whether that's trying to win the game or what have you. It's probably an important role in a lot of different games, a lot of, even sports. You need to have a captain, basically the captain. Boil it down to that. So I actually personally really like having multiple IGLs. Like really like having multiple IGLs. Whether it's a 4-man team, a 3-man team, a two-man team, I want every single one of my teammates to be mini IGLs, right? I'm usually the IGL, but I love when my team has feedback or has plans or has ideas. Actually, I push for that, right? I ask for that sometimes. Sometimes as IGL, I'm like, hey, Bumpa, what do you want me to do? I always say Bumpa because he's my permanent duo in life. Yeah, I think that's important. I lost my train of thought completely. So I just said that's important because I'm a bot. But anyways, yeah, I really like having mini IGLs on the team. I think that's very important. But if it is causing issues, if it is causing confusion, you have to try to set some solutions. Well, what comes to mind, right? Just right off the top of the head, I think that setting roles to call would be good. Back when I played with Bumpa, the idea was that he would call rotates and I would call everything else. He would call rotates. That was it. We didn't argue about it. because we recognized that there was an issue where we would spend way too much time in our box discussing which way we should rotate. Because I had ideas, he had ideas, and then at the end of the day, I had to call it. And we never came up to, it was so slow when you only have 15 seconds to really make a decision, or 1 second to really make a decision. You just go. So we said, Bumper, you're gonna call for rotates. And I would still call the rest of the game. I would still call when we rotate early. When playing endgame, I'd call what to do. I'd call the heal offs. I'd call all that stuff. But yeah, it still would work because we broke it up into a role. I think that's the way to do it in duos and possibly even trios. It really depends on your preference. It depends on your playstyles. It depends on how assertive each one of you guys are. Right? I think there's a huge discussion about IGLing around the time Dubs, Mega, and actually around snaking season in FCS, where a bunch of trios broke up. Tfue was playing with Clicks and Sway, and Clicks was IGLing. I think Tfue even tried out Dubs, and Dubs was IGLing, and Tfue was kind of calling as well. Clicks was, it was the Tfue, Clicks, and Dubs, I think was it. And people were like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because there's 3 IGLs or there's 2 IGLs and they're clashing. I don't think that's always the case. It might have been the case in that instance, right? I would say that for that Bizzle, Dubs, and who was it? Bizzle, Dubs, and Booga was the trio. I don't remember anyway, but there was a moment where I'm like, this trio just doesn't work. Like there's everybody is good enough to be their own IGL. Everybody has an ego, but the person who should be IGL in that trio was Dubs. The person who should be the IGL was Dubs. He's the fastest thinker. He is the most positive. He's the most encouraging. He should have been the IGL, but he could not control the egos of the other two. Not necessarily that they were arguing, but he couldn't overstep their decision making because he's not experienced enough and he's too young. All right. So there's a lot of situations where it might look like it doesn't work to have 2 IGLs, but I think having 2 IGLs is fine. It can work, contrary to what a lot of people would say on competitive subreddit, where it's like there's 2 IGLs on this team. It's never gonna work. It's never gonna work. Can't happen. Cloaksy's on a team with an IGL. It's over. It's over. Like look at Tfue, Cloaksy, and 72 Hours. 72 Hours is a very, very strong-headed personality. When you actually watch their games, he's actually IGLing a lot of times. He's a little bit more shy. He's a little bit more. He's a little less assertive, you know. Where Cloaksy is oftentimes the guy making the calls, making the final decisions. But that's actually a team that has 2 IGLs, I would say, for sure. And it worked. It worked really well. It worked really, really well. So there's an example, actually, of what I would suggest next, right? Which is prioritize who is the main IGL. Prioritize yourselves, okay? So you'll have a main IGL who makes the decisions, and he's the guy who basically chooses the better calls on average. He chooses the better decisions on average. And he's also somebody who can filter the information fast. He filters the information fast. So your 2 teammates say, oh, we can rotate north. I have a launch pad. And then the other guy's like, no, we can snake these boxes and use a shockwave, right? That IGL needs to be like, okay, quick. I just got those 2 ideas. Boom. Let's use the launch pad. And that's it. So that's important. So that's priority calling. That's you assign somebody to be the main IGL and he's making the decisions. But again, you have the mini IGLs down below who are feeding him options. In that case, that person who is not the main IGL needs to frame his calls in a different way. He can't be move. He can't be the guy, go, launch pad. He can't be that guy. If he's that guy, it's going to cause confusion like you're talking about. If you are the guy underneath, if you're not the most priority, you have to frame your calls to be more of questions or suggestions that help your main IGL, right? So it's more like, maybe we can rotate southeast, or we should rotate southeast, right? Frame it in that sense, rather than go, launch pad now, southeast. So you have to have clean comms in order for that to work, in order for that give and take to work. But I think it works. I think it is good. Honestly, I prefer having everybody be a mini IGL to one person being the top of the top, and having good priority and clean comms around it are so important, because at the end of the day, more eyes is better than one pair of eyes. Like, I'm only peeking out of one window. I can't see what's going on south of me when I'm watching north. I don't know what's in your inventory. I don't know what possible ideas you've come up with. I don't know who you've tagged, right? Yeah, and it does come down to trust. It does come down to trust. You have to trust your main guy, and your main guy has to trust you guys. He has to trust you guys to talk. He has to let you guys express yourselves, express your ideas. Okay? Question number 3 from Genji.
Hey Balla, I have a question. So me and my trio never figure out how to play or what playstyle we should acquire during the semifinals. Usually in opens, we play normally like we do in customs, and take the fights we know we have a high chance of winning, and it works. Then when it comes to semis, our landing spot retail, which was almost never contested in opens, is now always contested with one more teams. A few games later, where we just don't play our early games right and still have under 15 points, we switch up our landing spot and went to Mexico or Westworld or whatever you want to call it. It was always uncontested, and we have great loot and great mats, but don't find any fighting opportunities until second or third zone. And in second or third zone, we don't find any safe opportunities to fight people with a high chance of getting out, meaning we could easily get third-partied or sniped. So we play it safe and go for endgame. In endgame, we usually get to 1 to 3 kills total with no placement, and simply naturally die just from getting lasered while rotating or getting shockwave through and falling into someone's box. Then we decide we need to double key more because we were barely getting placement. Double keying usually gets us 10 to 20 points in the last 5 games. I ended at 41 points in the week 2 semis. Thanks.
Awesome. No, thank you, Genji. The question. Long, but I basically narrowed it down to, I think the question's trying to get at is, how do I make adjustments between the open plays and semifinals or finals even, right? So there's a lot of people watching who are just now qualifying for semis. There's a lot of people watching who's qualifying for finals, or even just playing the cash caps because they don't have time. But yeah, how to recognize the differences between places and going from there. I think very, very, very good question. Very, very good question. Because how many people are qualifying every single week, but then doing terribly when it comes to the finals or semis or whatever you are talking about, right? In this case, you're talking about semis. So let's do a little exercise here with chat. YouTube, you can do it in the comments if you like. But what are the differences between the open games in FCS and the semifinals games in FCS, right? You listed some already in your question, right? Where Westworld is uncontested and retail started getting a little bit more heavy. But what are some other ones? What are some other ones? Less bots. Yeah, exactly. So I wrote down a few here. Let's go over some of the ones that I wrote down already. Opens kind of have easier end games, right? So obviously semis are going to have harder end games, just slightly, right? Opens, really, you end up getting an end game and you slay out if you're good. I mean, it depends on your level of play, obviously, but it is typically easier end games, less people alive. And then somebody in chat said bots. There's less bots. Yeah, definitely. There's way more bad fights in opens, but they're also bad players, so it's kind of okay most of the time, because you end up getting in a fight that you don't want to because there's a bad player pushing you, but you're able to mop it up pretty easily because they're bad. That happens in opens all the time, and you're comfortable with that. So you don't really have to adjust your loop path to really try to avoid people. Okay, but in semis, all of a sudden, those people who are still taking bad fights are actually good. So it's like, well, how do I get away from this now? Do I have to spend mobility to get away in the semis? Kind of a question. And then you guys touched on it. Or actually, yeah, Genji, you touched on it. The loop paths are more contested in semis. There's a lot more free stuff in opens because people are scared of dropping retail, or it's just really easy to mop everybody dropping retail. So less people rotating late on edge zone in semis. King Clout says, true. Very true as well. Because everybody's pushing towards center zone. So that concept that I talk a lot about in VOD reviews kind of changes. throughout the tournament, right? And opens, that concept is probably not true at all, actually, where you can stay edge zone and end up not finding a lot of people because people are just bad and they don't actually know how to play. But yeah. So, okay, those are some of the differences. So let's continue the exercise. What are some adjustments? I turned German all of a sudden. What are some adjustments that one might make based on the differences we just listed out? All right. You guys decided a couple. You guys swapped spots. You went from retail to Westworld, and you decided that was uncontested. Yeah, because you are finding that actually it's kind of against the difference we said, but yeah, you found that Westworld was uncontested. Retail was a little bit harder to play, so that was a little bit more contested. You tried W King. You tried playing for endgame, and all these kind of didn't work. Some people in chat are saying you have to deal with Storm Surge. You have to get more tags. Yes, especially as finals comes along, you have to actually consider it. You have to actually consider it. That's something that literally ruins teams who aren't considering it at all. So good adjustment there. Thank you, King Clout. Yeah, so why are your adjustments not working? The adjustments you guys made were swapping spots, W King, and playing for endgame. Why are these adjustments not working? My theory is that you guys just have such huge gaps in your game that you're basically trying to make adjustments that cover the gaps, which is fine. Like, they cover him. They basically just throw a tarp on them. But if you still walk in that hole, you're going to fall and die in the spike trap, right? That's basically what's happening here. It's an Indiana Jones cave. You guys are trying to skip along, and it's not working out because at the end of the day, you still have holes. You still have holes. You can't take shortcuts. It is good to do that. Don't get me wrong. It is good to do that when you're trying to play the best that you possibly can. You've got to cover up those holes because otherwise you're not going to place well, right? But you've got to find a way to cover those holes. And when I say holes in your game, it's because, right, you do one thing and it's like, well, actually I don't have enough. You try to play for endgame in the semis because it's better to play for endgame in the semis. You can't W key as much because you're actually dropping somewhere else and you don't have enough loot. But when you end up getting to endgame, you don't have enough loot to play it, right? Or you're just actually not that good at endgame as you thought, right? That's a possibility too. Right? Even if you did drop retail in the semis and you did do well, you would still end up dying in the end game because you're just not actually that good at the end game. And that's no shade intended. I obviously haven't watched you, so I can't actually speak to the level of skill that you guys have. But this is just my assumptions. These are just my guesses, right? Yeah. So that's that whole concept of compensating for the holes in your game is good. But you need to find a way to fix that. So what can you do to fix those things? I think you can literally identify which one is the biggest hole that you want to fill. Actually, let's just pick the one that's earliest on, right? You're not good enough at fighting early game so that you can't deal with the contestation of retail in semis, right? You can't deal with that because you guys are not good enough at fighting early in retail. So fix that by playing a lot early in retail. Just play a bunch of scrims early in retail. Play a bunch of arena early in retail. That's it. Just leave the game after. Don't work on anything else. Literally, I'm serious. Just do early game practice in retail and scrims. Try it. That's it. Just take a practice session. Just practice early game in retail. And then if you identify that you're not actually good at end game, go play some Atlanta scrims for as long as possible. Play the farthest zone rule you can. Hey, see guys, this is why zone rules are kind of useful, right? You just freaking go play a 5th zone rule or something like that. I'm just kidding, but yeah, play end game only. That's it. Play the most shambles that you can find. Have one shotgun, no mobility, and 300 mats or something like that, and play end game. Those are exaggerated values, exaggerated loot, but yeah, play end game shambles. And then W key. Go in arena, go in Atlanta. No, you can't really do it in Atlantis, but go in arena and just W key as much as possible. Play the Trios Cash Cup and just W key as much as possible. Play the Solo Cash Cup and W key as much as possible. And maybe you'll break through on that hole too. It's possible that you have holes that are not that deep on all different sides. Got to fill them a little bit to fill them. But yeah, figure it out. fill the holes. You guys will be good. It's just all about figuring out what the biggest hole for you guys is and making a decision as a team that we need to fix this. And let's focus hard on fixing it until we can not have to make adjustments to cover the holes. Okay. Cool. Easy question. And I'm spending not that much time on it because the next question is very much similar. So let's hop right into that. Thank you, Genji, for the question. Moving on to Daffer.
Hey Balla, my question to you is how do I set goals and targets for myself to achieve during every single tournament game, especially the solo tournament games where there's 15 games to play? Most of the time I'm confused when I enter a game. I'm like, alright, where do I drop? Do I drop aggressive? Do I W key this game? Do I play for placement this game? And sometimes mid-game I'll realize, oh, there's 22 people left. What do? Do I still play for endgame? Do I start W keying now, even though it's a little late? And I only have like 1 kill or 0 kills for that matter. And if there's only 22 people left, they're all gonna have stacked loot. And then I end up doubting myself and confusing myself, and that ends up always getting me killed. So I just need some advice on my mentality right there. And another thing is,
all right, sorry, you had 2 parts to your question. I'm only gonna answer the first one. Call me a meanie, but no, I think the first part of your question is enough. And also in the future, guys, if you do want to submit 2-part questions, just submit them as 2 separate submissions, right? That way it's really easy for me to do it as a show, because I want to spend some time on this one. And if I were to move on to the next part of your question, Daffer, I would have broken it up into question 5. And so, yeah, it would have been nice if it was segmented. I don't think I would have answered that other one because it was similar to something I've answered in the past. But let's continue with this game plan thing, okay? How do I set goals and targets for myself to achieve during every single tournament match? He doubts his mentality and plan throughout the game, which ends up getting him killed. So he gave a couple examples, right? Where actually the only example I can remember is I'm playing in a tournament. All of a sudden, there's only 22 people alive, and I'm like, oh wow, it's easy placement or whatever he said. And then I start to waffle on my decisions and how I'm playing and how my game plan is, and I end up dying or getting myself killed because I'm waffling so much, right? I can't decide, do I want a W key or do I want to just play for placement in this game, right? So my first suggestion is stick to your guns, stick to your first thoughts, play on your feelings and don't doubt yourself. Just have a thought and be like, okay, let's go. Boom, boom, boom. That's it. That's what I want to play. I'm not going to second guess myself. I'm not going to change what I thought. If I have a thought and it's good, just go for it. It doesn't matter, right? It's better to just have a decision and have a clear plan and a clear idea and be happy and confident in that decision than do anything else, right? So don't be like, oh, 22 people alive. Let me play for placement. And then you see an opportunity to go W key somebody because there's a guy in front of you and you're like, oh, I can go W key this guy, and then go do it, right? Pick a side and just go for it, right? I think that's important. And I know that's hard. I know it's hard because it's very dependent on results. It's very important for you to stop before your games and tell yourself it doesn't really matter what you decide as long as you commit to it. Tell yourself that. Literally, tell yourself that. It doesn't matter what I decide as long as I commit to what I think, okay? But you can also adjust. You can adjust on the fly. And this is kind of what I'm talking about. Adjust, but don't second guess your adjustments. Okay. It's good to adjust. The only thing is that if you're in a fight, you can't adjust. If you're literally in a fight, you have to survive that fight before you can really make an adjustment. So if you're rotating, make your you realize something, make your adjustment, go move on. Right. You have to be able to find the spots where you can make adjustments and focus on that. Don't all of a sudden look and see, oh, it's top 26. If I just survive one more time in this, I'm going to get a placement point. No, you just have to finish the fight, right? Just finish it. Because otherwise you're going to end up waffling and getting yourself killed. Just finish the fight as you would, win the fight, and then you're good. But then the other thing is you mentioned the fact that like you randomly see that there's 22 people alive in the lobby or something like that. You should know whether games could be W key games ahead of you even queuing, right? By the time it's a W key game. By the time there's a possibility of a game being late, by the time you queue, because you're queuing 2 hours late, you should know that the game is going to be easy. The game is going to be light, that you can push for kills or you can play for easy placement. You should know that based on the time, based on how people have played, based on how many games are left for you, based on how low your points are, how high your points are. You should be able to know what the game you're going into is going to be before you really get into it. Sure, it varies a lot, but yeah. Yeah, you should know that, and you have to monitor it. So during early game, when you drop your spot, you drop Viking Hill, and you see there's 99 people up, and then 30 seconds later, you need to look up again at the player count, at the kill feed, and feel it out. Is this game going the way that I thought it would? Is this game speeding up? Is there already 20 kills in the first 30 seconds of the game? Then you can be like, yeah, okay, cool, this is it. This is part of that checklist that I always talk about, that macro checklist where you need to be checking on certain things. Check the kill feed, see who's in your game. Check the player count, see how fast it's going down. Check, your inventory, all that stuff. That's part of the macro checklist that you need to be doing. Check down the hill, all those sorts of things. But player count is part of it. And with the assumptions that you had of the game before, prior to queuing up, you should be able to say, okay, yes, my assumption is true. This is going to be a W key game based on the player count. Right? Do that every 30 seconds during the early game and decide. Okay, but alternatively, you can be rigid. You don't have to be fluid, like I was talking about. You don't have to be able to adjust all the time. You can be really you could be really rigid, which is just stay the course. Go into a tournament with one idea, one plan, one decision on what you're going to do the entire time, and don't play it differently a lot. This is how a lot of pro players play the opens and the semifinals. They literally just go. They're like, okay, I'm just going to W key as much as I can and get as many points. And there you go. Because not only are they good enough that works, but it's easy for them to just stay in one mindset. But yeah, it's good to be rigid. It can be good to be rigid. And I would recommend doing that. Just by come up with some statements, okay? Settle on some game plan. Settle on, I will only play for wins. I won't even play for placement. I just will only play for wins. And that's why some players just sat in ballers all tournaments long. But hey, that was their game plan. And for some of them, it worked out. There was people who qualified for the finals of the World Cup just by sitting, not the finals, but the final round of World Cup qualifiers by literally not getting a single kill. They just got wins. They got 6 wins or something like that. And Bizzle was that way too, right? He just played at the baller all game. He played no weapons for an entire game. Just stick to a game plan. Okay, here's another statement. I will only play for placement. Here's another statement. I'll just W key as much as possible. And then another one that's actually a little bit more interesting. I will W key until first circle closes, then I will play for placement as much as possible. It's fine to have these overarching statements that you will do every single game. Sometimes it will be ruined by other players, right? Sometimes you won't be able to do it, but that's the nature of our game. You just try it as much as possible. Be that guy that shockwaves away because he sees one person, right? Just shockwave away because you want to play for placement. That is your game plan throughout the entire tournament. It's fine. Being rigid is fine. And some of the best esports teams that I've ever seen have been very, very, very rigid. Seriously, a lot of the French CSGO teams were the most rigid ever. They would literally do the same thing every single time. One that comes to mind as well is the Chinese team, Tyloo. They literally do just set plays the entire time. They don't change it at all. They don't play a default. They literally just do set plays every time. They do full walls of smokes on every single site that they play against. I'm exaggerating a little, but that is an example of a rigid team who does very well. They have the same game plan. But then you go up against somebody like Astralis or SK, for example, or not SK anymore, MIBR, CSGO references when we're doing a Fortnite show, nice. And they're fluid. They don't care what the other team is doing. They just adapt, they change it, and they go from there. In my opinion, those are better. But you can't, the skill ceiling, the ceiling for a rigid team is still very, very, very high. I think it's easier to reach a ceiling with a fluid mentality and a fluid game plan. But yeah. So there's examples of that in in Fortnite too, right? Like Psalm is actually a very rigid player. He comes up with his game plan and he plays it to a T every single game, no matter who's dropping at a spot, no matter who is dropping on his rotate, no matter who's griefing his ball, he's gonna go for it over and over and over because that's his plan. Okay, he might make some slight adjustments, but he still sticks to his game plan. There's so many people who get dropped on once in a tournament and are like, okay, I'm out. I can't deal with this. Peace. Because they are way too fluid. Because they are not adapting at the small micro level that they need. But anyways, yeah, stick to something. Sticking to something is better than being fake fluid, which is I think what you're describing, where you're being fluid, but you're not really believing in your decisions. You're not believing in your thoughts. You're just going for something. I think that's fake fluid. I think that's why it's resulting in waffling. I think that's why it's resulting in you getting killed. So I think you should try both ways. I think you should try being really, really rigid, and I think that'll help you in being fluid. So thanks for the question, Daffer.
Hey Balla, I've been noticing a recurring struggle in some of my creative and in-game 1v1s. When I have a high ground, I can't seem to hold it or abuse the advantages it gives. When I push for the retake, my opponent just cranks a couple 90s while I attempt to retake, and it puts us back in the same situation we were just in. The only way I often find myself winning these fights is sneaking in shots on defensive slip-ups from them. What can I do to hold and more aggressively retake high ground rather than just relying on unforced errors from my opponent?
Cool. Thank you for the question, Science. It's our good friend, Science Museum, who actually submits so many VODs to our viewer submissions, which we haven't done in forever. I'm sorry about that. But the question was about the same thing, basically. It's well, two things, two parts. He's often on high ground and he feels like he can't capitalize on his high ground advantage, right? That's one. And then he oftentimes can't, or he struggles to retake high ground. He struggles to implement any of his high ground retakes because the player above him just goes up and up and up and up. So yeah. Let's tackle the high ground part because I think that's a little bit more interesting first. But let me say, for one, I think this is something that we should be able to solve mostly just by watching other people, because there's always an example. There's almost always going to be an example of, Booga creative 1v1ing or fighting an endgame 1v1, and somebody does something, and you'll see the difference right away between your play and his play. I think your play is that you're really not pushing your advantage. You're not using your advantage. You're not getting into people's faces because you might be unconfident, but I don't know. We can't really pinpoint that reason directly because we're not watching your game. So let's come up with some other reasons. Like we said, not confident. Say maybe you're indecisive. You see something, you see an opportunity, but you all of a sudden see something else, and then you're indecisive. That causes you to waffle. That causes you to stay still on high ground or in your box when you're going for the retake. Which is kind of also that you're like in your head, right? You're like, oh, I have the advantage. No, I should win, right? That's something that actually happens a lot in this game. Is I have high ground, I should win this fight, so you don't do anything, and then all of a sudden you don't do anything. Right? It's the same concept as like when you take somebody's wall and you edit and then you still lose the fight. You're like, wait, I just took your wall, man. I just got stairs over you, and then you lose. Same type of thing, right? You think that you have an advantage, but you don't do the right thing anyways with your advantage, so you lose. That could be a reason. You're in your head in that way. Or you're not getting yourself enough information to see whether there's opportunities to go for it. You don't see that there's an opportunity for you to push your advantage. So I don't know which one of those it is, but I think the answer in almost all cases is literally just go, go, go. Never let up. Never let up. As soon as you get high ground, start spamming your SMG. Start spamming your SMG. Go get closer. Try to close the distance. Try to see which direction the opponent's moving into, right? There's things you can do. You can try to bait people into moving by spamming your SMG a little bit, then stopping. Is he going to open on you? Does he open the edit, right? All these little mind games, all these little things go into it and try to force your opponent to make those unenforced errors. Right? You can't just wait for somebody to make an unforced error. You have to force them. Right? That's actually what this game is about. That's what box fighting is about forcing them to make forcing them to make errors. I don't know why I'm saying forcing unforced errors. No, that's not how it works. Force them to make mistakes. Don't let them have the initiative. Don't let them have the tempo. That's definitely something that is a concept in this game, is tempo, right? Don't let them breathe. Don't let them think. Don't let them move. That's why it's all about muscle memory. It's all about being really, really, really fast. Force them to make mistakes by abusing your tempo. If you have high ground, you have the tempo. You can make the plays. They have to react to you. Don't let them breathe at all. Get on their face. Go, go, go. That's what you'll see Bugga do. You'll never see him sit on high ground when he has it. All right, let's talk about the flip side, because I think it's really a mechanical question. It's really a thing where I think you just don't have enough retakes, right? If you can't retake high ground, I think that you just literally don't have enough retakes, right? Are you doing everything that the current 1v1 kings are doing? Are you side jumping onto your stairs, or are you still side jumping underneath your stairs? Right? Because there's a lot of people who are still side jumping underneath their stairs. You have to be side jumping on top of your stairs these days. You can't do anything else. Are you thwifo coning? Are you side jumping off of your thwifo cone? Are you doing a face sway? Are you doing any of these interesting high ground retakes that people are really using right now? I'm gonna guess no. I'm gonna guess no. If you can't take high ground off of somebody who's just doing 90s, my guess is nah. You're not doing it. You're not doing it. Look for shoot downs. Look for all that sort of stuff. This is really a mechanical thing. It has to be, in my mind. It really has to be. Because if you can't retake high ground, I think anybody who's up to speed in terms of the mechanics of creative 1v1 is always gonna be able to retake high ground on somebody, because they're not just sitting on high ground. You guys might be 1v1ing wrong. The people that you guys you're fighting against, right? Because if he's just 90ing and you're struggling to get up because you don't have the best high ground retakes, where you can't actually cone him or do anything, or you can't shoot him down, then yeah, you guys might be 1v1ing wrong, I guess. I don't know. Watch some more 1v1s. That's my suggestion. Sorry if that sounds harsh or rude. It just seems like what it is. Seems like you guys might be 1v1ing wrong. All right, cool. Thank you guys all so much for the questions, all the submissions. D26, Duncan, Genji, Daffer, and Science, the guys who were on today. Thank you so much. If you do want to submit your questions to get featured on the show, make sure if you're in Twitch chat watching right now, you do ! Hey Balla in chat. That will link you to a Google Forms where you can fill it out, put the Vokaroo link where you record your voice and the question, and just fill out some information there. If you're on YouTube, you can just click the link down below. It'll bring you directly there. But yeah, make sure you guys follow, like, subscribe, do all the things everywhere. Please hit those bells, hit those hearts, hit those whatever it is, because it helps, and it also helps you to get more content like this. So with that said, I think we're done. Peace.